Before we talk about buying homes, before we talk about credit scores, interest rates, or down payments, we need to talk about why black home ownership didn't start on equal ground. Because this story didn't begin with bad money habits, it didn't begin with lack of education, and it didn't begin with poor decision making. It began with laws, systems, and policies that decided very early on who was allowed to own land and who was not. This is black history, but it's also real estate history. And if you don't understand this part, nothing else makes sense. In America, land has never just been about having a place to live. Land has always meant power, security, stability, wealth, political influence, legacy. From the very beginning, owning land meant you mattered. It meant you could vote. It meant you could build. It meant you could pass something down. Now, here's the hard truth. For 400 years, black Americans were the labor that built the land but were legally barred from owning it. During slavery, black people were not just excluded from ownership, we were considered property ourselves. So when slavery ended, the real question wasn't how do we help formerly enslaved people succeed? The real question was how do we keep them free but powerless? And that question shaped everything that came next. When slavery ended, millions of black Americans were technically free, but economically stranded. No land, no money, no legal protection, no access to credit. There was a promise, 40 acres and a mule, but that promise was quickly taken back. Instead of land ownership, black families were pushed into a new system that looked like opportunity but functioned like control. That system was sharecropping, and it changed the trajectory of black home ownership for generations. Sharecropping was sold as a path forward. The pitch sounded fair. You work the land, you give us a share of the crops, you keep the rest. But here's what actually happened. Black families didn't own the land. They didn't own the tools. They didn't control the prices. They didn't control the math. Landowners set the rules. Landowners kept the books. Landowners decided what you owed. And somehow, every year, black families ended the season in debt. Debt means you couldn't leave, you couldn't save, you couldn't buy land, you couldn't build equity. So instead of chains, there were contracts. Instead of whips, there was debt. Instead of ownership, there was survival. This wasn't accidental. This was economic containment. All right, now let's connect this directly to real estate. Home ownership requires savings, stability, predictable income, and access to credit. Sharecropping destroyed all four. When your income changes every season, when you're always in debt, when you can't leave without consequences, you can't buy land, you can't build wealth, you can't plan long term. So while white families were acquiring land and passing it down, black families were trapped in a cycle designed to keep them working land, not owning it. That gap didn't start in the 1960s, it started right here. So when black Americans began moving north during the Great Migration, they were chasing opportunity, jobs, safety, a future. But what they ran into was the same new version of the same barrier. Jim Crow didn't just live in the South, it lived in housing policy, zoning laws, and real estate practices nationwide. Black families were restricted to certain neighborhoods, charged higher rents, denied mortgages, forced into overcrowded housing. Even when black families had money, they were blocked from buying where value grew. So, yes, we moved, but we were still boxed in. Jim Crow wasn't just about water fountains and buses, it was about space. Who could live where? Who could buy where? Who could build wealth where? Zoning laws, racial covenants, violence, intimidation. Entire neighborhoods were protected from black ownership, not by accident, but by design. And here's what that meant long term. If you control where people can live, you control where wealth can grow. Black neighborhoods were intentionally underfunded, over-policed, undervalued, not because of the people, but because of policy. This is why conversations about the racial wealth gap must start with housing. Homes are the primary way Americans build wealth through appreciation, equity, inheritance. When black families were denied ownership for generations, they were denied access to the single most powerful wealth engine in this country. So when people ask, why don't black families have the same generational wealth? This is the answer. Not laziness, not ignorance, not culture, history. This history didn't disappear. It echoed in lower home ownership rates, less inherited wealth, higher rent burdens, appraisal gaps. You can't fix what you don't understand. And you can't run a race properly if you don't know where the starting line actually was. This video isn't about excuses. It's about context. Because once you understand how the system worked against black home ownership, you can learn how to move smarter within today's system. And that's exactly where this series is going. Next, we're breaking down redlining, the policy that turned discrimination into maps and permanently reshaped black neighborhoods. If this resonated with you, subscribe, share it, and stay with me because home ownership starts with understanding.